Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Assalamu alaikum. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. The topic today is spirituality and the family. So I want to start just by getting a sense from all of you when we say the word spirituality, what that means to you, because there's actually not one agreed upon definition. So I want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So what do you all think about when you hear the word spirituality? What does it mean to you? Peace? Okay. How do other people define spirituality? Yeah.
Connection.
Connection? Okay. Others?
God consciousness.
God consciousness? Okay. Any other ideas? Okay. So in my mind, when I think of spirituality, I also think about connection, and connection to primarily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, connection to oneself, and connection to the world, like everything that's around us, including the people in our lives. So that's kind of a broad definition. And through those connections, ultimately we hope that we would find peace, and that as we, increase our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would also hope to become more God conscious. So everything that people have said, I think, certainly fits. And some other definition is, a person's quest or striving for the divine or towards the sacred. So many people nowadays, when they talk about spirituality, they talk about it as something that's separate from religion. So I want to also get a sense from you all. When you think about religion, how would you define that? Same as spirituality, something different? What thoughts do you all have?
Just more of the ritualistic aspects of just sort of day-to-day living.
Okay, so more the rituals and of day-to-day living,
Yeah.
in terms of religion. Okay, yes.
More prayer involved.
Prayer.
Prayer involved.
Okay, so there's more prayer involved when you think about religion. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I'd say belief, but I think spirituality in my mind is a part of that. So it's kind of
Okay, yeah, so belief, and she was saying that for her spirituality is a part of that. Yes? Pardon me? A blessing from Allah. Yes, alhamdulillah. So for Muslims, I think a lot of times there is perhaps less distinction or separation between spirituality and religion, because ultimately, our religion and the rituals of the religion and the rulings in the religion are supposed to help us to achieve this higher state of spirituality. If we're only performing the rituals and we're not actually feeling more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and more connected to the world around us, then somehow our rituals are not really helping us to achieve much. Because just kind of following the rules, going through the rituals without feeling anything, is kind of besides the point, and it then leaves the religion to be empty. And I think, and this is my own personal opinion, I don't have anything to back that up, but I think that one of the reasons, many people are leaving religion, in addition to being frustrated with the institutions, is that they don't find that spiritual meaning when they're practicing the rituals. They may be attending the place of worship, but they're not necessarily feeling uplifted, feeling that peace, feeling more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the Creator. There are many other reasons as well, but that's not the topic for today. I also think about spirituality as more about being than about doing. So when we think about rituals, we're doing something, right? We're engaging in prayer, we're giving sadaqah, it's the doing. The spiritual piece, in my mind, is also about just being. And a lot of times, in this society, we get very trapped into going, doing. We're always moving. But to truly, feel a sense of spirituality, you sometimes just have to be quite still. Just very still. So the topic today is spirituality and the family. And so I want to try to link, sort of the relationship between spirituality and our relationships with other people in our families. And I will broaden it also to our friends as well. And then I want to talk about some ways that we can nurture and build the level of spirituality in the family. When we think about our relationships, think about when you're in a relationship that's going well. Could be if you're married, it could be with your spouse, with a parent, with a sibling, with a friend. And when you're in a relationship that's going really well and you feel really good, you don't have to answer this question, but think about for yourself, do you then tend to be more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or less connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What kind of relationships are you in, and are they vehicles towards spiritual growth, or do they tend to pull you away? And then think about when you're feeling spiritually connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, for all of us, our level of spirituality can go up and down. But think about a time when you were feeling quite connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then think about what impact did that have on your relationships. Did you tend to treat people better? Were you more patient, more forgiving? Or were you more irritable and less tolerant and less flexible? Just kind of think about that. Generally, there's a positive correlation. When we're having a good connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it tends to make us feel more compassionate towards others. We want to give more of our time. We want to give more of our money in terms of sadaqah. We tend to be more forgiving and more flexible. And so there's a positive impact on relationships. And if we've chosen wisely and we have good friends or good spouses who are also inclined to help us achieve our best spiritual state, then they will always be either encouraging us or putting into the relationship those kinds of things that make you want to be more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you might even be engaged in doing some of those things together. Some of you may know and some of you may not, but I'm trained as a mental health professional. And so I'm always, of course, very interested in the impact of everything on our emotional and mental well-being. So of course there's also a very strong connection between our level of spirituality and our emotional well-being. So when we are in a good place with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this has a positive impact on our mental health. And if we're not in a good place with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it can lead to increased anxiety or maybe a more negative outlook on life. And sometimes when people are depressed, if they're suffering from depression, they may also find it difficult to engage in the rituals of our religion, like Salah and Siyam, because they don't have the energy or the motivation. So there's also that link as well. There is a lot of research that's been done about the benefits of spirituality and religion. Some of the research is a little bit contradictory, but for the most part, we do have evidence that says that children who are raised to have a sense of connection with a higher being, and of course this research was not done by Muslims, so they're looking sort of in general, children who are raised to have a connection with a higher being, a higher power, regardless of what they're calling that higher power, that they're 80% less likely to suffer from depression and 50% less likely to get caught up in substance abuse. So that's pretty important, okay? So we want to make sure that we are cultivating an environment at home where our children are learning to be spiritual and practicing spirituality. The same kind of research is there for adults as well. That people who are part of a religious community, they tend to fare better in their relationships because they're more connected. They're more connected to other people, and they're also more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when things are going well, when you're in a good community, right? And also, of course, being spiritual helps us to be grounded. It helps us to have that bigger perspective. And so when we're trying to make decisions about what to do in our careers and our marriage choices, how we raise our children, coming back to that relationship we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us to make the kinds of choices that are generally going to make us feel better because they're in line with our values and aligned with, you know, what we believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. And so it's really important. And I often wonder how people who don't have faith cope with such things as, you know, tragedies, the death of a loved one, being, you know, being fired from work or laid off from work or losing all your finances. You know, without faith, it can be very hard to make sense of those kinds of difficulties, those tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. So there's also some additional research that tells us that when people are spiritual, and to be honest, this research it's common sense as well, like it makes sense, that when people are more spiritually engaged, they also tend to be more compassionate. Okay? And why does that make sense? What ideas do you have? Why does it make sense that if we're more spiritual, we're going to be more compassionate human beings? Any ideas?
We're held accountable.
So we're held accountable, okay. And what is it that makes our heart softer, though? Because compassion, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us, and of course that might encourage us to treat people better. And what is it that makes our hearts softer when we are more spiritual? Any thoughts about that? Because compassion is part of that rahmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in our hearts, right? And so when we're connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we're connected with Him as Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and we are engaged in those activities that He's recommending or encouraging us to do, helping others, that all sort of fosters, you know, a feeling of rahmah in ourselves. When we're more aware of the ways in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has had compassion for us and rahmah for us, then we're also more likely to feel that towards other people. Okay, I mentioned in the beginning that spirituality is about being and that it requires us to slow down. How many of you have pretty busy, hectic lives? Am I the only person? Somebody has 2 hands up, but most people don't have their hands up. You guys all have like really relaxed. Did everybody come back from vacation or what? I think that most people living in this area of the country have very fast-paced lives. Okay? We have a pretty stressful lifestyle. Even our children are having pretty high-stress lives. They're engaged in, you know, whether it's like some kind of a sports activity after school, and then they're maybe going to HIBS program, and they may have Sunday school, and then they have their friends, and then you have guests coming over, and, you know, and if you have multiple kids, then you're rushing around to, you know, chauffeur them to their multiple activities, and it can be a very fast-paced, hectic life. And so it can be very difficult to find time to just be. But if we don't find time to just be and reflect, then our spirituality is going to suffer. Then we may be stopping for 5 minutes to pray Dhuhr or Asr, and it might be quite rushed. And we may or may not get anything out of it unless we're able to really be still and really connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So spirituality, you know, if we're trying to increase our spirituality, we're also going to learn how to take life at a much slower pace and to really take in what's happening in the moment, as opposed to always thinking about where I have to be in 5 minutes, and then what's happening next after that, and what's happening next after that. And so we're always like 10 steps ahead of ourselves, which means that we're not here right now, which means that we're not really connected to anybody, including ourselves or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes that happens for all of us. And believe me, as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, it was a good reminder for me as well, because I'm also caught up in this very hectic lifestyle, like everybody else. But when we start to slow down, then we create this positive feedback loop. So we slow down and we reflect, and we connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we become aware of all the ways in which His blessings are around us all the time. We start to notice things that we didn't notice before. So we notice random acts of kindness. We notice maybe somebody we passed who smiled at us. We noticed, you know, I was going to say the flowers blooming, but there's no flowers blooming right now. But we notice even, you know, the snow, the weather, the birds, if there happens to be a bird. You start to notice, you know, the color of the sky because you've slowed down long enough. And when you start noticing those things, then you're reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? When you're reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you start hopefully to feel calmer, kind of more at peace, more grounded, and then you can even notice more. And then you start to have a sense of calm. And so this is a really good way to manage anxiety, which is a very common disorder. Many, many people suffer from anxiety. But slowing down, taking things in, noticing what's around us, and then being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence in all the signs that He has put for us around us, whether in nature, whether in our children, whether in the people that we love, our friends. It becomes this sort of self-reinforcing cycle. All of us are going to fall out of that cycle from time to time, and we'll notice it because we'll start to notice that we're feeling stressed, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling disconnected, and that's okay. As soon as you notice it, then you start bringing back in those practices that help you to slow down and get back on track. And that's really what life is about. We try to stay on track, we fall off, we get ourselves back on it. We're straight for a while, we fall off, we get back on it, and that's really what it is. It's this continuous struggle to stay on track, and hopefully, over our lifespan, we're moving forward and up, you know, continuing to get better. So now, how can we integrate sort of our spiritual growth with our relationships? And that's, you know, really what we're looking at today. The first step, and we often skip this step, is to focus on ourselves, okay? Typically, we want to help our spouses become more spiritual, we want to help our kids be more spiritual, we want to help our friends be more spiritual, and we skip over ourselves. Why? Why do we skip ourselves? Because what?
Because we think we are perfect.
It might be because we think we're perfect. What's another reason?
We're stressed.
We're stressed. We don't have time for ourselves, right? We're so busy fixing everybody else. Okay, what else? Any other ideas? It's actually harder to focus on ourselves. It's a lot easier to tell people what they need to be doing more of. It's a lot harder to make ourselves actually stop and do it. So right now, since I have everybody here, you don't have to answer, but you can share if you want to. Think about some things that help you to feel more spiritually connected. What are some things that work for you? And this could be different for each person. So in addition to sort of the mandatory aspects, the fara'id, in addition to our 5 daily prayers and fasting in Ramadan and zakat, those things, you know, should be at the basic minimum for everybody. But in addition to those, what are the things that you find to help you connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it being outside and reflecting in nature? Is it making dhikr? Is it making dua? Is it listening to Quran? Is it reading about the Prophet ﷺ, and how he engaged with others? Just take a moment and see if you can generate a list, short list, 2 or 3 things that are most helpful for you when you need to feel spiritually connected. Yeah. Pardon me?
Hard times.
Hard times. Okay, so hard times help you to feel more spiritually connected. Absolutely. That's right, which is one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us hard times, right? Because He wants us, and we inevitably do, when we're faced with a crisis, we inevitably do turn to Him, right? But hopefully we would also turn to Him even when we don't have hard times, right? So there should be something that we can engage in kind of on a daily basis that would keep us spiritually connected. Okay? So does everybody have a couple of thoughts about what works for them? Because everybody's different. Yeah? Yes? Dua, yes. So making dua for yourself and making dua for others. Some people only make dua for others and they forget themselves. And some people only make dua for themselves and they forget everybody else, right? So you want to have sort of both. It's a both and. Make dua for yourself and for others. Make dua for this dunya and make dua for the akhirah. Okay? We can have both. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of giving us everything. So we don't have to just ask for small things. You can ask for big things as well. Okay? Yes?
When I hear dua to the ummah,
Uh-huh.
that really makes me get out of myself and think.
Okay, yes. So she's saying that when she hears dua for the ummah, it takes her out of herself, and then she's thinking about the bigger picture. Good. Yeah, and that helps sort of restore perspective. Yeah. Okay. So after you've identified for yourself what works for you, you also should spend some time with yourself reconciling your values with your lifestyle. So many of us have our values, our belief system about what the right way to live is, but we may not be living that way. So taking some time, and this is a process, it's not going to happen in 5 minutes, to really evaluate, are your inner and outer selves congruent? Are they lined up? Is my lifestyle, what I do every day, does it match with what I value, with what I believe? So if, for example, if I value honesty and I'm lying to people, then my outer self and my inner self are not lined up, and I will be probably experiencing some anxiety, if not a lot of anxiety, in addition to guilt. Okay, so when we're living according to our values, that is really a core requisite for being spiritually connected and connected with ourselves. Okay, otherwise we're going to run away from ourselves. And how far can you get from yourself? How far can you run away from yourself? Not far. Not far. So it's probably a good idea that you're living in a way that you like, so that you can like yourself and be in connection with yourself. Okay. Something that I think is very helpful, and I don't know how many people already practice that, but it's talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes himself as wali alladhina amanu. He is the friend and protector of those who believe. And think about, when you think of a friend, how you use a friend. You talk to a friend, you confide in the friend, you ask that friend for guidance, right? You spend time with your friend, you hang out with your friend. So we also want to cultivate that kind of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes people say that they feel kind of silly talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outside of, reciting Quran or making dua. But the truth is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows how we're thinking. Even if we don't say it out loud, He knows exactly what we're thinking. And if we talk with Him and be conscious that we're sharing our thoughts with Him and our feelings with Him, it can be very helpful in cultivating that sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you all the time. That sense of ma'iyya, that He is right there with you all the time. Okay? And when you feel like He's right there with you, obviously you're going to feel connected to Him, inshallah. So remembering that He's always there, that He's always listening. He tells us that He's closer than our jugular vein, which is, very close to us, and that He answers the dua, the call of any one of His servants that call on Him. Okay, so He's right there, but sometimes we're just not paying attention. We're not aware of Him. So once you've kind of spent some time thinking about what works for you and how you can become more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you don't have to wait until you've got it perfect, because it won't ever be perfect. But once you've spent some time thinking about this, then you can move to the next step, which is, how are you going to increase spirituality in your home, in your family? Okay? So it depends on what your family consists of. Is it a spouse? Is it children? Is it parents? Siblings? who's in your family and what ages are they, because that's going to determine a little bit how you cultivate a spiritual environment. But I think in general, it's important to talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the people around you. Because when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're bringing Him into our relationships. And we're making ourselves more conscious. And He then becomes part of this environment. So talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talk about the ways that He has helped you to cope with the hard times, for example. Talk about the ways in which He has blessed you, the good things that He's put in your life. Because, we often don't talk about those positive things. We often are talking about what struggles we have. But talk about all the blessings that you have. And if that blessing happens to be the person in your family, let that person know that you recognize him or her as a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so now you're bringing spirituality into your relationships, and you're also using your relationship as a way to increase your spirituality by reminding you more of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have kids, it's really important that you cultivate this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from a very, very early age. Children are never too young for you to talk with them. Okay? We often think that kids don't understand us, but they understand a whole lot more than we imagine. And it's important that you talk to them all the time. Talk to them about what you're doing, including your spiritual activities. When it's time to go pray, tell them why you're praying. Why is it good to go pray? Why is it important to interrupt playtime right now, or TV time, or cooking time, or whatever it is you're doing? Why are we stopping to pray? Tell your kids, even before they're old enough to join you in prayer. You just say it out loud. And believe me, they pick up everything. Everything that you say and everything that you do, they're just filing it all away. Okay? And one day you will see the manifestation of that. Okay? And it can be pretty amazing if they've been exposed to a lot of good things and then they start displaying that. It's just, that's another blessing really from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's pretty amazing. If you, for example, say the adhan at home, and you have a small child, by the time that child starts to speak, they will have memorized the adhan, and they'll be able to say it themselves. And you wouldn't have had to sit them down and teach them. They're just hearing it every day. If you're reciting Quran out loud, your children are going to pick it up. And it's going to be that easy for them and for you, because you don't have to sit them down and struggle with them to learn and memorize. You're just doing it out loud. If you're making dua out loud, there's a dua for almost everything that we do, right? When you wake up in the morning, before you go to sleep, when you enter the bathroom, when you exit the bathroom, there are dua for everything. And if you say them out loud, and I'll confess here, this is something I didn't think to do when my kids were little. I was saying them to myself. So they didn't realize what I was doing, and then they had to learn it themselves when they got older. But had I been saying it out loud, then they would have picked it up, just like some of the other things that they picked up, without me even realizing that they're just going to absorb it, just like everything else. Okay, so that's something that you can do. And if you don't know these dua, there are lots of collections, and I can mention them to you at the end if you want, if anybody's interested. Explain to your children not only why you pray, but everything that you do that's related to Islam. Because our children often don't know why we're doing what we're doing, and it doesn't make sense, to be perfectly honest. In a society where religion is, it's just not something that's talked about, it's not necessarily something that's practiced, obviously, it doesn't necessarily make sense why we choose to do some of the things we do. So we need to always be talking and explaining it to them. And if they ask us questions, the worst response would be, because I said so, that's why you have to do it. That's kind of the worst response. The best response is explaining. And if you don't know, say you don't know. And maybe you can go research it together. But because I said so doesn't cultivate any kind of feeling of connection with you or with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prayer time is probably one of the most significant opportunities that you can use in your home to cultivate a feeling of spirituality and connectedness. So it's really important, and again, you don't have to answer this out loud, but just ask yourselves, how often do you pray jama'ah? How often do you pray in congregation with your family members? Are people going off to their rooms and praying individually if they're praying, or are people coming together and praying? When people come together and pray, it's an opportunity for so many things to happen. You know, just like sitting down and having a meal together, which doesn't happen in every household anymore. These are opportunities. So when it's time to pray, first of all, you want to make that experience a positive experience for your children, which means not yelling at them, not telling them they're going to hell if they don't pray, not making them feel bad if they haven't prayed perfectly. But what it means is making that time a time that it feels good for the kids. So like if a family is coming together for prayer time, and either before or after prayer, they're also maybe checking in about each other's day, giving each other a hug, somehow cultivating a feeling of connection and affection, children will automatically want to be there. And children naturally want to copy adults anyway. So you see these little kids coming and standing, and then they run for a little bit and they come back. And it's important that you praise them for the time that they were standing with you, and not yelling at them for the time when they ran off and played. You know, especially the little kids who are not even obligated to pray yet. Anything that they do that approximates prayer, you want to just praise them and let them know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so happy with them. Okay? And that's another thing, is letting your children know when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them. The two kids shared a toy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them, right? The child listened when you told him or her to pick up the toy or clean up their room. Let them know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with you. So we have a tendency to tell our kids when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry with them. Okay, so then we basically develop this sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just waiting to punish us, and you know, there's all these rules and regulations to make my life miserable. I can't do this and I can't do that. I can't have fun. I just have to get up early to pray, and I have to interrupt my TV to pray, and I have to interrupt playing with my friends to pray. And that's no fun. It doesn't feel good. But if you're telling them that there's something they're going to get, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching and He's so pleased, then they want to do these things. And especially if they're doing it with you, because now they're having some quality time with you as well, which every child wants, especially if you cultivate that from a young age. Don't wait till your kids are teenagers and then expect them to want to spend time with you, because if you didn't spend time with them when they're young, they're really not going to be interested in you when they're teenagers. So there's an experience I had that still, when I remember it, it's quite moving to me, about the way that a child really can learn to have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I was visiting my sister, and at the time my niece was maybe 5 years old, and she has a brother. And like any two siblings who are close in age, they fight, especially over toys. And her brother wanted the toy, and she didn't want to give it to him. So I heard her crying, and I went to see what was wrong. And she was going through this struggle. The same struggle we all go through when we know what the right thing is, but we don't really want to do it because it's hard. So I could see this playing out in her. And after a couple of minutes, and I don't remember what I said to her. I wish I could say that I said something brilliant or helpful. I really don't know what I said to her. But I remember what she did. After a few minutes of struggling, with herself, she gave him the toy. And I asked her, why did you give him the toy? And she said, my teacher told me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves it when we share. So now I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy. But I didn't really want to give him the toy. Okay? So, of course, you can see there that she has learned such a valuable lesson. And I do remember after that I did tell her that I was so proud of her, because I knew she had made a difficult decision, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala definitely had noticed what she did, and that was something that definitely was pleasing to Him. So don't underestimate our children, okay? And when they start developing that relationship when they're little, then you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always have a prominent place in their life as they grow up. You also want to give children that awareness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there and He's always watching, good and bad that they do. Because as you know, once your children go to school, you're no longer able to watch them all the time. And they're going to make their own choices. So you want to start cultivating this notion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a relationship directly with them. And that whatever choice they make, they should do that because they're thinking about what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what displeases Allah. Not because they're afraid of you. Okay? Because honestly, we lose our power as parents pretty quickly. And the big choices, the big decisions, by that time, we don't have that much power in our children's lives. So when we cultivate that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they're mindful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching, then they'll start making those choices in the way that's going to be good for them for their whole life. Now, I'm not saying that a 5-year-old is always going to make the right choices. Neither will a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or, for that matter, a 40-year-old, right? They still need the parents to guide them. But take the emphasis a little bit off of you and place it more on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay? Because children can hide from us, but they cannot hide from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they can't hide the good that they're doing too. So again, don't only focus on the bad, focus on the good as well. It's also really good to start children in the habit of pausing and reflecting. Okay, so if you have some time after one of the prayers, maybe Fajr, maybe Maghrib, and all of you have prayed together, and then you just take a few minutes, you know, as a family, 5 minutes, and sit down and everybody can do their own reflection. And so you can teach children this idea of being still for 5 minutes. If it's a very little child, it might be 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be 5 minutes can be a long time for a child. But that they're just thinking. Maybe they're thinking about something they're grateful for, something that went well in their day, something that they want to work on in themselves. And we're doing the same. Okay, so then you start to just develop a habit where we're used to taking time out instead of just getting up right away to turn the TV back on or to go back and eat dinner or whatever it is that we're doing. Okay, just kind of slowing down. And keep it reasonable. You know, it isn't really reasonable to expect a kid to want to sit there for an hour with you and reflect. That's not reasonable. Make it age appropriate and also make it something that, again, they're doing it with you. And so they're, for the most part, children want to do that. Some other ideas, and these are just ideas, and you know, afterwards I'm going to ask you all to generate some of your own ideas and share with the group. But some things that you can do as a family. You can start taking the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's 99 of them, so this could be quite a long-term project. But you could take a name a week, for example, and look at the ways in which that quality is manifesting in your life. So for example, if you look at Ar-Rahman or Al-Wadud, okay, the loving, or the just, the merciful. Take this quality, and it's an opportunity to talk about what this means with your kids and to reflect on it, you know, for ourselves as well. And then think about your life as you go through your day. What are the ways in which that attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is manifesting in your life? So in which ways today have you seen His rahmah? In which ways today did He ease your way in any small or big way? Okay, so that's evidence of His rahmah, right? Al-Wadud, what are the ways today that you've seen that love that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you've experienced it, whether from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or from people around you, or that you yourself have given it to somebody, that love. So and that just kind of makes you more mindful. And you can talk about this. So everybody in the family can sit down and everybody could say one way that they noticed rahmah in their life today. Okay? So it's just an idea. It could be a game. You can make it with points, even if you wanted to. Whoever came up with the most examples would get the most points. You know, you can be creative. There's really no limit on what you do. But the point is to get the mind thinking and mindful and aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's important also to use the morning hours, the early morning hours, if possible, because those really are the times when we're most clear. We still haven't gotten busy with our day. So in my family growing up, that time of Fajr was the time that we were all together. And it's a time when I look back on my childhood that really, till today, is quite meaningful. It wasn't necessarily a long time, but we all prayed Fajr. We all had to get up regardless. And if we had guests in the house, whether they prayed or they didn't pray, they all had to get up. Everybody prayed. And then we would either, you know, learn one ayah or one dua. But we were all there as a family. And that, in my memories, became the time when, you know, I felt like we're all connected. My parents were busy, just like everybody here is busy. But that was the time that was dedicated for family. Because sometimes dinner time, not everybody could be there for whatever reason. And so you find a prayer that works for you in your house. When my kids were growing up, we really tried to pray as many, whenever people were home, whoever was home prayed together. And that did become a very important time because it's a time to connect. It's a time to check in with each other, even briefly, about how people's day is going. Does somebody need help with something? What's going right? And it's a good time to connect. It doesn't have to be a long time. Okay. The other thing is practicing gratitude. So all of us say Alhamdulillah, hopefully lots of times during the day, right? But I'm going to suggest something that you try as an experiment. And in fact, we're going to try it right now. I want you to say Alhamdulillah. And as you say Alhamdulillah, I want you to actually think of something that you're really grateful for. So it's not just Alhamdulillah, like a generic Alhamdulillah, but really think of something that you're grateful for. And as you do that, I just want you to tune into your body and notice how you feel in your body as you remember something that you are grateful for in this moment. Okay, so if anybody's comfortable sharing, what do you notice when you tune into your body and you really identify something that you're grateful for as you say Alhamdulillah? What do you notice in your body? Yeah. Happiness. Okay. Anybody else? Any other experiences? Relaxed. Any others? Satisfied. Do you want to say something? Light. You feel light. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So imagine, and you probably can't do this after every prayer, but you know, after each prayer when we make our tasbih and we say Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, and we say it 33 times. Imagine if, maybe once a week, you did this as an exercise, but every time you said Alhamdulillah, you identified something that you feel grateful for, something specific, and you took a moment and you connected with how it feels in your body. Okay? I'm telling you, that's a really good therapy. We normally just say Alhamdulillah, 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 right? Just fast like that, which is fine, it's good. Just remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our tongues has also a benefit. But just slowing it down and connecting. Imagine if you spent half an hour or 10 minutes even feeling happy, feeling light, feeling calm. Imagine the effect that might have on the rest of your day, and imagine the effect that would have as you engage with your spouse or your sibling or your kids or your parents, right? As opposed to engaging with these people when you're stressed and in a hurry and frustrated, right? Imagine how you will be different, okay? And so this is also something you can teach your children. That yes, we say Alhamdulillah, but slow down, think about something specific, and notice what you're feeling in your body. Okay? That's the therapist in me, you know, this thing about connecting with your body. But the truth is, we're so busy and we're so much in our heads most of the time thinking that we don't take time to connect with our body. And until we connect with our body, we're not connected to ourselves. And remember, spirituality is about connection. And if we're not connected to ourselves, it will be harder for us to connect genuinely to other people. Okay? The last point that I'm going to talk about before I open it up to all of you is practicing forgiveness. Okay? Now this is really difficult. We all talk about forgiveness, and we have to be forgiving as Muslims. We talk about it, and we tell each other, well, you have to forgive him, or you have to forgive her, you have to forgive me. But it's actually really hard, because it does require us to be mindful of certain things. One is that all of us make mistakes. So it's a lot easier to forgive other people if I'm aware that I myself have flaws, and probably if I interact with you long enough, I might hurt your feelings one day, not on purpose, but I might say something that offends you, I might upset you, I might embarrass you, unintentionally, I hope, but it will happen. And so because I know that I might do that to you, if you do that to me, it's a lot easier then to forgive you. So we have to be mindful of our own faults. It's also helpful if we make dua for that person. Okay, so when somebody is really upset you, even before they ask you for forgiveness or before they apologize, you can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive that person. So now you've connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which has the effect of softening your heart, and then it's easier. Of course, depending on what the person has done to you, it may take a long time to forgive or a short time to forgive. It may require other things. You know, if somebody's stolen something from you, maybe they have to return the property, or you need to see them punished, or, you know, there may be different things required. But the process is much easier if you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive them as well. And you can also make dua for yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps you to be more forgiving. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to overlook people's flaws. And He has asked us to make istighfar for the other person, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive that person. He's asked us to do that, and He's asked us to also remain connected to people even when they've offended us, even when they've upset us, that we still need to have a relationship with them. Okay? Particularly people in our family. And the people in our family are the ones who are most likely to hurt us, because they mean that much more to us than everybody else. The stakes are greater. And so when they say something hurtful, it weighs a lot more on us than if a stranger says it, right? So we practice these things in the family. And when we can model that to our children, then they are also likely to learn how to forgive it. But if we hold grudges and we don't forget and we remind them, you know, so the kid is 18 and you're still reminding them of the mistake they made when they were 10, then we didn't forgive and we didn't let go. And then we can't expect them to forgive either, okay? So we have to model whatever it is we want our kids to do. So at this point I'm going to pause and open it up for questions or comments, ideas that you have to add to my suggestions that we can all benefit from, because we have a few minutes before Aisha, inshallah.
I think the idea that you had about really thinking about what we're grateful for when we say alhamdulillah, to do the same with subhanallah. But I think that's really good, and if you were to couple that with when we make istighfar, think about the things that we do, then if I said something that was wrong and at the same time I'm saying alhamdulillah that I have the ability to speak, then it makes, you know, it humbles you, obviously, and makes you think twice the next time that you do it.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to repeat that because I'm sure you couldn't hear her over there, but she's saying that we can do this, you know, not only with alhamdulillah, but she gave the example of when we say astaghfirullah, that we're also very mindful of what it is we're asking forgiveness for. And then we can express gratitude that we're able to even ask for forgiveness, that we're able to speak that. Did I get it? Yeah. And so that really just kind of amplifies the effect and the level of spirituality there. That's great. Other ideas or questions? I'm sure other people have great ideas too. What are things that you've tried and that really work? Yes.
There are times when in prayer I would say astaghfirullah for the things that I am aware of, and also for the things I'm not aware of, because I don't know what is in the eyes of Allah, not the right thing. So I don't know, just my idea. That's how I
Right.
do my stuff.
Yeah, good, good. And there's actually a dua to that effect. So she's saying, making istighfar, asking for forgiveness for the things that you're aware of, and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you for the things that you're not aware of as well. And she was saying because she may not know, what something looks like in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also because sometimes we're not aware of what we're doing. We may hurt somebody. They didn't tell us we hurt them. We didn't mean to hurt them, and we don't even know. So absolutely asking for forgiveness for the things that we know about and the things that we don't know about. Other ideas or questions, thoughts? It's good for people to share because it really just makes the learning experience better for everybody. No more questions or ideas? Yeah?
I have a question. I think one thing that I find myself struggling with personally with two really young kids at home is being able to find time to even make my salah something that I can calm down and take a step back and use that to reflect. Do you or does anyone else have any strategies or suggestions for ways to help draw them into that or at least, be able to kind of set them aside in a productive manner at that time so that we can benefit from even just our salah?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. She's saying with two little children at home, it's hard even to make the salah a productive time, and she's asking for ideas that people may have as to how to make that a more productive time. So do people have ideas? That is a really challenging thing. Any ideas? It's hard because, when you have little kids, you don't even have a minute to do anything in peace at all. Yeah. Put them in a crib. You could put them in a crib, and if you have two little ones, it's likely that they're going to be, one might be crying, or one might be pulling the other one's hair, or in some way or another, or they may even just be fun and funny, in which case they're distracting. So it's actually quite challenging. Yeah.
I've seen moms give their kids like coloring books or some activity that they save just for prayer time. So the kids kind of look forward to prayer time, or some snack that they just have to sit and eat.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So this is
almost like they look forward to that one thing during Salah time.
okay. So this is a suggestion of planning ahead so that the mother has planned some activity that's fun for the kids to do while she's praying, or even a snack, so that they're going to be seated and distracted with their snack. And so you really have to plan ahead. Hopefully your kids stick to the schedule you have in your mind, because they often have their own schedule. But the thing is that it's also important. So it is important to try to come up with ways that you can structure your day so that your prayer can be as productive as possible. And I think it's also important that you, as a mom, are compassionate to yourself and recognize that it is actually quite hard. And that there are lots of ways to be connected spiritually, even with the little child. So, you can, when you're playing with your child, you could use their fingers for tasbih, and you can have them try to say it with you. You can try to sing songs that are about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it sounds like it's about to be the adhan, so I'll stop here and end with subhanakallahumma wa bihamdak. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.